Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I am here with Lori.
Hello.
And we are, like everybody else, trying to make it through the snow and ice, which is about to leave. And in the meantime, being that we can't get out and about and film, I'm going to be putting out another video that we have never put out before. This is all the way back in summer of 2019, a trip to Elizabethton, Tennessee, around the time of my 39th birthday. And this is the Sycamore Shoals State Park, and we're going to be showing Fort Watauga as well. And I'll describe a little bit more about the fort. I thought this was a pretty cool place, Lori. I really enjoyed it.
Seeing it. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, so we're not going to really talk through each individual site that you see here because you should be able to experience the museum as we did. But it was a really cool place. Fort Watauga is important because in the late 1770s, some call it one of the first forts of what would be the United States. There was a group of settlers, John Sevier being one of them, who would go on to be the first governor of Tennessee, that settled in this area, which at that time had been part of Virginia, later part of North Carolina, and then of course, what it is today, Tennessee. They settled in a part, the people that were with them were called the Over Mountain Men, and they settled in what would become Fort Watauga. Now, what's interesting, Lori, about this group is we always think about Native Americans losing their lands, and what you're seeing right here is a diorama of the fort. But the settlers here actually had leases with the Cherokee Indians and then later purchased their lands directly from the Cherokee. The only problem was there was a royal declaration made in 1763, because again, we were still part of the British Empire. There was a royal declaration that all settlers had to leave Cherokee lands. So leasing from the Cherokee and then buying those lands from the Cherokee was still in direct violation of that decree. So come the late 1770s, the settlers were ordered to leave. And we'll get into more about what happened exactly in just a little bit.
So in 1776, the British forces decided to actually arm the Cherokee and have them attack the fort because the settlers were not going to leave.
And what we'll see here in the next few exhibits with mannequins on display, you see some of the types of fortifications that were out in front of the fort. Obviously, a fence, which they would shoot through into oncoming soldiers, which would also be protection against, wild animals, the elements, you name it. And we'll see a recreation of the actual fort when we go outside. But the exhibits inside are really cool. I really love a lot of the artwork that's on display and the attention to detail. In fact, a lot of these pictures are done by Native American artists, which I think really adds an element of authenticity. And it's kind of neat to see them portray their history in this art form. So Lori kind of teed us up for what was going on. So in 1763, again, we have the decree for all settlers to leave Cherokee land. In the early 1770s into the mid 1770s, the Fort Watauga and the settlers that were there they had a great relationship with the Cherokee. They had purchased lands from them and they had no intentions of leaving. Now, Nancy Ward, who was a leader of the Cherokee, she was a beloved woman, which would akin her to basically a chieftain. She tipped off she wanted there to be a good relationship between the settlers and the Cherokee. And so, even though she was of the Cherokee Nation, she tipped off the settlers that an attack was coming. So, they were able to gather their forces. John Sevier had been working on another fort called Fort Lee, which he abandoned. And they would go to Fort Watauga and prepare for the attack. Dragon Canoe, a couple other chieftains, one being Raven, would attack the fort, and the men and women fought together. That's what I found so interesting. The men and women fought together in the fort. They used everything they had, including scalding water, and they held off the Cherokee advance. They held off two separate attacks until the Cherokee finally abandoned the attack of the fort. And the fort was in contiguous use all the way up to 1819, including taking parts in battles of the Revolutionary War. The Over Mountain Men had victories over the British, and the renowned and the legend of these fighters would be known for some time. These were settlers who had formed their own country, essentially, had formed good relationships with the Cherokee Nation, and were determined not to leave their new homeland. And they didn't.
No, she's not. She's a Chinese, though. No, she's not. All right, let's go. Why are you saying this while I'm filming?
You told me to. Now, this is a recreation of the fort that is near where the fort was actually located. At its height, it had about 200 people in it, and we're going to show you around a little bit and let you see what life was like back in the day.
It looks like this in the way
This is where I come in the middle of a zombie invasion. And this is the look the settlers would have seen, the oncoming British.
Huh? I believe so.
It's the Lion 227's owl. How did you get here?